October 23, 1987. Johnny Carson never went silent. In 25 years of hosting The Tonight Show, through technical disasters, awkward guests, bombing jokes, Johnny always had something to say. Until the moment his producer, Fred de Cordova, walked onto the stage during a live broadcast, something that had never happened, and handed Johnny a folded piece of paper. Johnny read it. His face went white. The smile disappeared completely. For 11 seconds, an eternity on live television, he said nothing, just stared at the note. The audience started to worry. Ed McMahon stood up from his desk, and when Johnny finally spoke, his voice was shaking. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need to step away for a moment." He walked off stage, still holding the note, leaving 15 million viewers wondering what could possibly make Johnny Carson abandon his show. The answer was in those 19 words. Ricky, car accident, Pacific Coast Highway, UCLA Medical Center, need to go now. It was a Friday night at NBC Studio One in Burbank, California. The Tonight Show was taping the last episode before a week-long break. Johnny had been in a good mood all evening. The monologue had killed. The first guest, actress Goldie Hawn, had been charming and funny. Everything was perfect, scripted, under control. Fred de Cordova sat in the production booth monitoring everything, as he always did. He'd been producing The Tonight Show since 1970, 17 years of working alongside Johnny Carson. One of those boundaries was sacred: never interrupt during taping unless someone is dying. The phone in the production booth rang. Fred's assistant answered it, listened for a moment, then covered the receiver with her hand. Her face had gone pale. "Fred, it's Johnny's ex-wife, Joanne. She says it's urgent, about Ricky." Fred's stomach dropped. Ricky Carson was Johnny's middle son, 39 years old, a photographer who'd struggled with the weight of being Johnny Carson's child. Fred took the phone. "Fred, there's been an accident." Joanne's voice was shaking. "Ricky was driving on Pacific Coast Highway. His car went off the road. They're taking him to UCLA Medical Center right now. Johnny needs to know. He needs to get to the hospital." Fred looked through the glass at Johnny, who was laughing at something Goldie Hawn had just said. In about 30 seconds, Johnny's world was going to collapse. "I'll tell him," Fred said. "We'll get him there." Fred grabbed a piece of paper and wrote quickly. "Ricky, car accident, Pacific Coast Highway, UCLA Medical Center, need to go now." He folded it and stood up. His legs felt unsteady. In 17 years, he'd never walked onto that stage during taping, but there was no choice. Before we go deeper into what happened when Johnny read that note, the 11 seconds of silence that terrified America, the moment that changed Johnny forever, if you're here because you remember when television could still surprise you, when real life could interrupt the performance, subscribe to Johnny Carson Legacy Stories. We're uncovering the moments when the mask came off and the man showed through. Hit that bell. Fred walked onto the stage. The audience saw him first and started murmuring. This wasn't normal. Johnny was in the middle of saying something to Goldie when he noticed the audience's attention shift. He turned and saw Fred approaching. Johnny's smile disappeared immediately. Fred de Cordova walking onto the stage during taping meant something catastrophic had happened. Johnny stood up, microphone still clipped to his jacket. "Fred?" Johnny said, his voice already tight with worry. Fred didn't say anything. He just handed Johnny the folded paper. Their eyes met for a second, and Fred's expression told Johnny everything he needed to know. This was bad. Johnny opened the note with shaking hands. His eyes scanned the words once, then again. The color drained from his face. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The studio, which had been buzzing with confused audience chatter, went completely silent. 11 seconds. Johnny Carson stood there for 11 seconds without moving, without speaking, without acknowledging anything around him. The cameras were still rolling. 15 million people were watching. But Johnny Carson, the man who'd built a career on perfect timing and never missing a beat, was frozen. Ed McMahon stood up from his desk. He could see Johnny's hands trembling. "Johnny?" Ed said gently. The sound of Ed's voice seemed to break whatever spell had frozen Johnny. He looked up from the note, first at Ed, then at the audience, then at the cameras. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need to step away for a moment." He unclipped his microphone, handed it to Fred, and walked off stage. No explanation. No joke to ease the tension. He just left. The audience sat in stunned silence. Goldie Hawn had tears in her eyes, though she didn't know why. The director cut to commercial immediately. Johnny was already pulling off his jacket, heading for the exit. Fred caught up with him. "I've got a car waiting. I'll drive you." "My son," Johnny said, his voice breaking. "Is he alive?" She didn't know. "They're taking him to UCLA, that's all she could tell me." Ed McMahon appeared. "I'm coming with you." "Ed, you don't have to." "I'm coming with you," Ed said firmly. "You're not doing this alone." As Fred drove toward Westwood, Johnny sat in the back seat staring at nothing. Ed sat beside him, not saying anything, just being present. "I haven't talked to him in 3 months, Johnny said suddenly. "We had a fight about nothing important. I was supposed to call him back. I kept meaning to call him back." "You'll talk to him at the hospital," Fred said. "What if I don't get the chance?" Johnny's voice cracked. "What if the last thing I said to him was angry?" Ed put his hand on Johnny's shoulder. "Don't think like that. Not yet." The drive to UCLA Medical Center normally took 30 minutes. Fred made it in 18. They rushed into the emergency room. Joanne Carson was already there, pacing near the nurse's station. When she saw Johnny, she ran to him. "What do you know?" Johnny asked. "His car went off the cliff near Point Doom," Joanne said, her voice shaking. "Someone saw it happen. They had to use ropes to get down to him. Johnny, the car rolled 3 times before it hit the rocks." Johnny's knees almost gave out. Ed grabbed his arm to steady him. A doctor approached them. "Mr. and Mrs. Carson?" "Yes," Johnny said immediately. "How is he? Is he alive?" "Your son is alive," the doctor said. Both Johnny and Joanne let out sounds that were half sob, half relief. "But he's in critical condition, multiple fractures, internal bleeding, severe head trauma. We're taking him into surgery now. The next 24 hours will determine everything." "Can I see him?" Johnny asked. "Before the surgery?" The doctor hesitated, then nodded. 2 minutes. He's not conscious." Johnny and Joanne followed the doctor to a trauma bay. What they saw made Joanne turn away, crying. Ricky was barely recognizable. His face was swollen and bruised, tubes everywhere, machines beeping. Johnny walked to the bedside slowly. He took his son's hand carefully, trying not to disturb the IV lines. "Ricky," he whispered. "It's Dad. I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry about the fight. I'm sorry I didn't call. I'm here now, and I'm not leaving. You hear me? I'm not leaving." Ricky didn't respond. The ventilator breathed for him. "Mr. Carson," the doctor said gently, "we need to take him now." Johnny nodded. He leaned down and kissed his son's forehead. "I love you," he whispered. "Please don't leave me. Please." They wheeled Ricky away toward the surgical wing. Johnny and Joanne stood in the empty trauma bay, both crying. If you're feeling what Johnny felt in that moment, the terror of potentially losing a child, the weight of words left unsaid, you're exactly where we want you. That's what Johnny Carson Legacy Stories is about. The moments when the performance stopped and the truth took over. Subscribe now. The surgery took 6 hours. Johnny, Joanne, Fred, and Ed sat in the waiting room while the clock crawled forward. This was Johnny Carson, stripped of all performance, all control. This was just a father waiting to hear if his son would survive. At 4:47 a.m., the surgeon finally emerged. Johnny was on his feet immediately. "How is he?" "He made it through surgery," the doctor said. "We've repaired the internal bleeding, set the fractures. The head. Trauma is our biggest concern. We've induced a coma to give his brain time to heal." "But he could wake up," Johnny asked. "He could be okay?" "It's possible, but you need to understand, even if he wakes up, there could be permanent damage. We won't know until the swelling goes down." "When can I see him?" "He's in ICU now, 2 visitors at a time, 10 minutes every hour." For the next 3 days, Johnny barely left the hospital. He canceled The Tonight Show for the entire week, something he'd only done a handful of times in 25 years. The network released a brief statement. "Mr. Carson is dealing with a family emergency." Rumors flew, but Fred de Cordova kept a tight circle around the truth. On day 4, Ricky opened his eyes, just for a moment. Johnny was holding Ricky's hand, reading the newspaper out loud. "Dad." Ricky's voice was barely audible, rough from the ventilator. Johnny dropped the newspaper. "Ricky, oh God, Ricky, I'm here. What happened? You had an accident, but you're okay. You're going to be okay." Ricky's eyes closed again, but his hand squeezed Johnny's, just slightly, just enough. The doctors called it a miracle. Against the odds, Ricky's brain swelling decreased. His cognitive function was intact. He would need months of physical therapy, but he would recover fully. 2 weeks after the accident, Johnny sat beside his bed. "That fight we had, whatever it was about, it doesn't matter. None of it matters. I spent 3 days thinking you might die, and all I could think was that I'd wasted 3 months being stubborn instead of being your father." Ricky's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, too. I know I'm not easy." "Stop," Johnny said firmly. "The only expectation I have is that you live, that you're happy, that you know I love you. Everything else is just noise." "I love you too, Dad." They held each other, carefully because of Ricky's injuries, and cried. Johnny returned to The Tonight Show 3 weeks after the accident. He didn't explain what had happened. He just said, "I had a family emergency. Everything's okay now." But the people who were there that night, the audience who saw Fred walk onto stage, the crew who watched Johnny freeze for 11 seconds, they understood that they'd witnessed something profound. They'd seen Johnny Carson lose his composure. They'd seen the moment when being a father became more important than being America's favorite host. Fred de Cordova never talked publicly about that night. But years later he said, "In 11 seconds, I watched him transform from Johnny Carson the performer to Johnny Carson, the terrified father." It reminded everyone there that behind the desk was a human being who could hurt like anyone else. The unedited footage was kept in NBC's archives. The network offered to show Johnny the footage once, in case he wanted it destroyed. Johnny declined. "Keep it," he said. "Maybe someday it'll remind someone that family is more important than television." Ricky Carson recovered fully. He and Johnny rebuilt their relationship, regular dinners, phone calls, visits. The accident had given them a second chance. When Johnny retired from The Tonight Show in 1992, Ricky was there in the audience. When Johnny took his final bow, he looked directly at Ricky and mouthed 2 words, "Love you." Ricky mouthed them back. The note Fred handed Johnny contained 19 words. "Ricky, car accident, Pacific Coast Highway, UCLA Medical Center, need to go now." 19 words that stopped one of television's most controlled performers in his tracks. Johnny Carson went silent for 11 seconds that night. But in that silence, he said everything that mattered. He said that family comes first, that vulnerability isn't weakness, that being a father means showing up, even when the cameras are rolling, even when it means walking away from everything you've built. The show always went on for Johnny Carson, except once, when it mattered most, when his son needed him. And in that moment, Johnny proved that the man behind the desk was exactly who everyone hoped he would be. Someone who understood that love is more important than laughter, and being present is more important than being perfect. If this story moved you, if those 11 seconds of silence reminded you what really matters, subscribe to Johnny Carson Legacy Stories right now. Hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to remember that family comes first, because Johnny Carson did, and he never regretted it for a second. On October 23, 1987, America watched Johnny Carson stop being a host and start being a father. And that's the moment we'll remember most.